Welcome to the Jeremy and Andy Talk Movies podcast. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Andy.
And this is just your occasional reminder that you can find this podcast anywhere you find podcasts.
Yeah.
Videos on YouTube. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Amazon Music. And now that I'm done pitching all that.
It's all right.
Andy, we began this week
Yeah.
by going back 25 years and visiting two movies that were relevant today because they have sequels coming out. And we knew that we were going to go see the new Mission Impossible at the end of this week.
Yeah,
Something
we
we've been
are.
hyped about for a very long time. I wasn't as hyped about a continuation of the Final Destination series. We did go back and watch the original Final Destination,
Yeah.
something I was a fan of. We talked about how we enjoyed it and how it held up.
Enjoyed it a ton.
And after having that conversation, it actually inspired me to say, you know what, maybe I'll go check out the new one. You already had.
You inspired yourself.
I decided to. When you say it like that, you're absolutely right.
As well we should. Inspire ourselves.
So I went and saw the new Final Destination movie, Final Destination Bloodlines, walked out of the theater and thought, Andy and I could have a good conversation about that.
Yeah,
so I
we can.
messaged you.
Let's do it.
And graciously, you agreed and said, yeah, let's do it. So here we are with a midweek pod that wasn't originally planned. But you know what? It just makes it bookend so well because we got
It's perfect.
the 25th anniversary of Final Destination 1. We put out that pod, and then we're going to do the new Final Destination. Then we're going to put out the 25th anniversary of Mission Impossible 2, and then we'll put out the new Mission Impossible. And we'll just
It was
bookend-
meant to be.
Yeah, bookend nicely. All right, so I'm going to give a summary of this movie. And
My
then
favorite
we'll jump
part of our
into our
podcast.
thoughts. So here's my summary. Our protagonist, Caitlin, keeps having a recurring dream about a tragic accident involving her estranged grandmother, Iris. In search of answers, she finds Iris and discovers that what she dreams was a premonition her grandmother had had, which led her to changing Death's plan and saving lives of a lot of people. However, Iris has been tracking Death's decade-long revenge tour as it's been taking out the families of everyone who survived that day, and now it's made its way to her own family. Caitlin takes this information and tries to find a way to save her family, but as she is told in the film, when you mess with Death's plan, things get messy.
Boom, boom, boom.
Andy,
Yeah.
tell me what you think about Final Destination Bloodlines.
So I saw it Friday, and when I first saw it, I thought, you know what? I enjoyed that. The more I think about it, the more I liked it. I thought it was a really good time, and does not break any new ground whatsoever, but it doesn't pretend to. It's a movie to me that very much knows what it is. It jumps right into it, and I had a good time.
So, yeah, my answer was also, again, surprisingly yes.
Yeah.
Granted, low expectations help, but
Sure.
I was thinking about it. I was like, how many movies that are if you go beyond 3 or 4
Right?
in a series of movies are actually good?
Yeah.
Like usually these horror franchises, once you get going late in the franchise,
They almost become a self-parody.
they just become garbage.
You get like Jason Takes Manhattan, or
right.
you get that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so when I was thinking about it like that, I was like, it's actually, it's more impressive that here we are. This is the 6th film, I believe.
6 movies, 25 years later. Yeah.
And the fact that they kept it interesting for me. Now, it may help that, like I said, I've only seen 1 and 2, skipped 3 through 5, and then
Right.
watched 6. So maybe but I was watching it going like, this movie is the right kind of dumb, ridiculous fun.
Yeah. And knows it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It knows exactly what it is.
Yeah, the movie was made by people who are fans of the franchise.
And you can tell.
Yeah, exactly. I read in the trivia that the directors, when they were, I guess, doing like a Zoom meeting to like try to get the project with some executives, did this whole thing where they played out like a death scenario on the meeting and
Nice.
and made everybody laugh. And I was like, you get that sense.
Yeah.
Like they're the type of people that would do that have that sort of fandom.
Yep.
And it's kind of like a it doesn't feel like fan fiction, but it feels like people who respected and loved the goofiness of the franchise and wanted
And
to
they
do
just
it right.
lean into it.
Yeah.
Yep.
In other words, it didn't feel like somebody going like, oh, I've got to make this Final Destination film for the studio, so I'm making
Okay,
it one,
fine.
but I'll put my own unique artsy twist on. No, it's somebody who just said, these are what they are. We love what they are. We're going to protect what they are.
Yeah.
And make it from there.
And I will say, and I know we'll get into this, but they do find some fun twists along the way. And honestly, like a little bit of heart along the way. I thought that do elevate this into like, this was a good movie.
Yeah. So while we're just talking about those filmmakers, the directors were a team of directors, Zach Lipovsky and Adam B. Stein. And if you look at their IMDb, you'll be shocked to find that they've done basically very little and nothing that would lead you to think Final Destination.
Right.
Like basically the last, I think, movie they directed was a Kim Possible movie. So sure.
Yeah, sure,
you
why
know?
not?
And then the writing has 3 written by credits.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's one of those things where it was written by somebody and then passed to somebody else. And
I'm sure.
then passed to somebody else and multiple drafts. But some talented people worked on the
Yes.
screenplay. So Guy Busick, who wrote recent Scream movies and Ready or Not and Abigail, somebody that we've appreciated a lot of his work here on the podcast. John Watts, who
directed the Marvel Spider-Man movies.
Directed exactly, and wrote Spider-Man: Homecoming and wrote and directed the movie Wolves that we did last year. And it's kind of like, that's weird that you've got these directors nobody's ever heard of, and then you got a writing team that's got some real clout. And then Lori Evans Taylor, who had written nothing I'd ever heard of.
Yeah.
My guess was she kind of had the first draft.
That would be my
and then
guess.
It passed through
that would be
the
my
others.
guess too.
This cast, really, like, I hadn't seen anybody in this
I don't
cast.
think I knew anybody in this
before.
movie.
There's a couple people that had a look that I was like, have I? And I wanted to look it up and check, but no, like nobody I'd seen in this movie.
Sometimes that works to your advantage because you have no previous history with any of these actors. So it's just kind of a clean slate.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the movie itself.
Yeah.
That we got in here. So this one, I realized from reading the trivia, again, hadn't seen several of them. This is the first one where the opening premonition is not from our main character.
Right.
And we really don't see the immediate payout of what she does with the premonition. We don't see it till later. So that was right off the bat.
They're taking what you know, but they're just putting a little bit of a twist on it.
Yeah. So, and it goes way back in time. What is it, like the 50s or
50s,
something?
I think. 50s or 60s, right? Yeah.
And this...
And literally just immediately we're right there. Because if you're going to see this movie, you know what, they know who their audience is. We know what we want as an audience. Boom, we're just right into it.
Yeah. That whole scene with the restaurant in the tower, I don't know how long the actual like calamity part is. It felt like one of the longer sequences of opening tragedy. Which is cool because when they first go up there, you just think, okay, this thing's falling.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to fall to their death. Yeah. It ends up being a lot more than that. There's a lot of little bits in that one.
But it reminded me of exactly what we said about when we did Final Destination 1. They do a really good job of making you feel the anxiety of this character. Elevators, heights, being high up and just having glass below you. Normally this would annoy me to death, but like the quick cuts, the like you're kind of in the character's mind and it's like cutting between like the flame as they're broiling this food and the noises and all this stuff. And it's like, this is just a really effective way to build the tension and show the character's anxiety.
Yeah. So when everything's going down and everything's falling apart, I do have to say this. I don't think that there has been a more satisfying death in this movie or maybe any horror movie than that boy when he gets crushed by a piano.
Exactly.
Sorry, spoilers for people who haven't seen it. But
spoilers. It's really hard to talk about this movie without spoiling anything.
So we should have put that warning right away. But in that sequence, that boy is such a turd, and you know he's gonna get it.
You know he's gonna get it. And that's the thing too. Like, and I don't know if I should credit this, but like you mentioned, Guy Busick, someone who's he does radio silence movies, Scream, Ready or Not. The horror comedy and kind of like not the broad comedy, but just a very dark comedy. And obnoxious boy getting crushed by a grand piano works. It got a laugh in our theater and it's really effective. And that feels like along the lines of Scream and Ready or Not and even Abigail.
Yeah. I made that note and I was like, should I feel bad that I was like, I really enjoyed this?
No, they
boy
want you to enjoy that.
Piano? Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. So like I said, we go straight from the main girl in that sequence. So for the beginning of the movie is Iris. As I said, and that whole sequence ends with her. She finally does fall. She and this boy are the last ones alive on this tower, and she falls. And as she gets like impaled, falling, it's quick cut to a new character screaming in class, and you're kind of like, as a viewer, I was
it's not what you're used to from these movies.
Not just because it like you're used to jumping back with the protagonist and like, okay, reset to a point
Yeah.
before the premonition. I mean, it's modern times all of a sudden, and you're like, at first you're like, so was this person seeing it, or is this a total cut? It was just a little jarring, but
a little bit, yeah.
Then exposition helps us find out like this is a recurring nightmare this girl's having, and the only thing that she can piece it together with is she knows the name of the person is Iris in there, and then her grandmother's name is Iris, but she doesn't know her grandmother.
Right.
So she thinks this is my grandmother.
And we learn all this really fast. This movie just has a great pace to it. It does not waste any time at all.
Okay, I'm going to push back on that a little bit.
Fair enough.
Because my next note is, I did think that this movie slowed down a little bit.
Did you?
In the next stretch.
Yeah.
Because from premonition to when
we have to meet the family,
there's a decent amount of like, we got to develop this family storyline. It's not terrible.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. It's not like I was, but I did. There's one point I looked at my watch just to go like, what time did the movie start and what time are we at now? Because it's been a good like 30 minutes of plotting.
Yeah.
And I think the main thing is just that we talked about with the first one. The first one really didn't do any character development outside of the whole their battle with death thing.
Right.
Our main character, he was like solely focused on it, and like that's all they talked about. So this one is actually like it gives you more character development.
It does,
and like maybe a little heart and something to root for, like you said. So I'm not complaining, but it was shocking to be at number 6 in a series where I thought they're totally going to be done with thinking in this movie.
No, this is a pretty thoughtful movie. I think what I mean is just that like she doesn't wake up and we don't get a long time between her waking up from her dream. And it's like very quickly, we just learning like recurring dream. My grandma, I don't know. That's, I guess, what I mean, where it's like you get a lot of information really quick.
Yeah.
Like it's not the kind of movie where 45 minutes in, our main character is still trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
That all happens quickly.
That's fair. And she is pretty focused on figuring these things out right from the start.
And I thought it was really good writing. She's like, this is ruining my life. It was like, okay, great. Like, we're not wasting any time. She's like, I have this dream every night. I can't sleep. I'm flunking school. We learn a lot. Like, you're right. We do pause and we do get to know this family, but we're still learning and things are moving forward.
Yeah. And then I just wrote, once we get to the typical, okay, now it's death versus the characters.
Yeah.
It's the only way I could think to describe it.
That's accurate.
I was like, I'm pretty into it at this point.
Yeah.
So again, I might be jumping some things here, and we're willing to spoil. I guess we already gave the spoiler alert.
Yeah.
She figures out that it's coming for their family and it's going to go in this particular order.
Yeah.
And that's after, I guess, her uncle dies first.
Yeah. Yeah, he does.
In a gruesome lawnmower accident.
Happens to the best of us.
Which these movies are great about doing things where you as a viewer go, I don't think that could actually do that to a person. They
really ride that line between like, could never happen. But then you're just kind of like, but maybe it could. Like, I don't know. Like, they do a good job.
It definitely is like fear that you would have that is kind of irrational.
Right. But it does a good job.
Yeah. So not to just breeze by the uncle dying, but that is sort of like gets us going. Like you kind of have this slow build-up.
Now we're full on Final Destination.
I think it's a Final Destination thing that always that first death after the initial setup is like the first one. Like everyone has to get on board before it gets really interesting.
Right.
And not even that necessarily everybody's on board, but at least at that point it's like, okay, like everybody's heightened, awareness. But the twist of the oldest cousin turning out to be a secret half brother who actually is in the Bloodlines.
That was really good.
That was because you get the whole long sequence of him in the tattoo parlor.
And I would also just say, like, at this point in the movie, before you know this, you're like, okay, I know who this character is. He's the outcast. He's a jerk. He doesn't believe in this. Here he goes. He's going to die. And he doesn't.
Mm-hmm. So this is the biggest thing I'm shocked about. He was the character probably most featured, or at least that I remember the most from the previews, because they do.
Yeah, that preview was just him getting
him and the chain on his nose ring. And in the preview, I'm thinking like, you're exactly right. The tattooed, pierced guy in a,
bad attitude.
Yeah, chain caught on the nose.
Yeah,
it's
like all right, this guy's toast.
They're giving us a D-bag who's going to get destroyed. And then even by the time the scene shows up, I'm like, it's weird they've given us this family development where like I actually don't think of this guy as like a total jerk.
Mm-hmm.
he's tattooing dad on his arm. You know, like he's
Yeah,
just
he
heartbroken.
turns on like
the sad
whatever his
list.
name is, and it's like
Eric is his
Eric's
name, yeah.
sad playlist. It's like, okay, this is actually pretty funny.
Yeah, like all that was way smarter and better than I thought.
And
would
better than it
possibly be.
honestly needs to be. Like,
Yeah.
they could have just settled for, all right, we're just going to kill everybody and da-da-da-da.
Like, so what it comes down to is it's kind of like that boy at the beginning. I honestly expected this to be a character that you're kind of rooting for him to get his, and then by the time it's happening, you're going like, "Oh, don't die, dude!" Like,
Yeah, you know what? I kind of like this
I'm
guy.
actually rooting for you, but all this stuff happens to him. And then he ends up in the whole parlor's on fire, and we cut away. And you don't think anything about it as a viewer. I didn't, anyways.
Yeah.
I was just like, dude just fell and everything's on fire.
Yeah, they're going to go to the tattoo shop and see his burn up body.
Yeah. And then the great twist of she's Caitlin, our protagonist, just grabbed her little brother, and they're going to try to find him. And you're right, you think you're going to find out that they find out the tattoo parlor burned down, and then there he is. He just shows up.
Yeah, they almost hit him.
He's just A-okay.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Yeah, they do a really good job of just slightly changing the course of the ship that we're used to.
Now, can you nitpick and say, well, once you find out that he's not part of the bloodline, what the heck was all of the death, creeping around him?
You
like,
could,
sure,
but
you
it's
could.
like,
You
at
could.
that point, you're overthinking it.
Yeah. You gotta just roll with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Did that go through my mind? Like, well, then why did?
Death? Who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah.
Because before we even find out that's why Death didn't actually get
Right.
him, because we still think he's next up on the
Yes.
list, we hit the great scene of the sister, who's the
Best
who would
scene
be
in
the
the
next
movie,
line.
in my opinion.
So yes, because Caitlin's walking with him, and she's trying to warn him about all the danger, and he is just mocking her, like, "Ooh, watch out for this!" And she's like, "Watch out for this thing leaning against
the tree saw into the soccer ball into
She's
the leaf
like,
blower.
And the kid's playing soccer, and every turn he's like, "What could happen?" He's like, "The thing could fall, and the leaf blower blows in the kid's eyes, and they kick a soccer ball and hit you in the face." And he's like, "Oh, you're right. That might be fatal."
Yeah.
So the sister goes running along.
Which, by the way, incredible directing, because it's that happens in the background.
Yeah.
And you just kind of see it in the background. It's great, and again, the perfect balance of horror, and it's kind of hard not to laugh.
Oh, for sure. Because that thing falls. The leaf blower blows in the kid's eyes. The kick a soccer ball hits her in the head. And
she
it
goes
flips
right
her.
into a trash can.
And she goes, ah! And it just flips her into a trash can. That's getting picked up and dumped into.
An incredible sequence leading to just the way they can balance something that is so gross, but you're just kind of like, that was awesome. When the girl finally, again, we're into spoilers, she gets smashed in the garbage thing, and it's like part of her face and her arm, and it's just like, oh, this is good. Like, this is just the great balance of gross and, like I said, the dark comedy, and it's, they're just really nailing the tone, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say it. Like, all of the deaths, pretty much after that initial premonition thing, are dumb. Like we said, lawnmower on the face, garbage truck crushing someone, and the guy driving along in the car, listening to music and swiping on the dating app profile, can't hear anything around him. Everything's just like, this is so dumb.
But it works, man.
But you just know that's what you're in for. You're in for, like, what if the worst dumb circumstances happen in a row?
And
that's the whole point of these movies.
And because it's a well-directed movie, and I think everyone is acting up to the level they need to in this movie, it all works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's just a great 5 minutes.
Yeah.
10 minutes, whatever it is.
Yeah. I liked the idea that they find out. So they, again, typical Final Destination thing. They find their way to a hospital where Tony Todd's working.
Of course he is.
And for his final movie role ever.
They give him a nice send-off.
He gets to give him a little exposition. And but it's cool because it weaves back. It kind of ties other movies together because turns out he was the little boy.
Yep, who Iris rescued.
saving. And so he was at the end of the line of Death's revenge tour again. Yeah. So that's why he's basically like, I'm at the end of my life. I'm about to die too. Yeah. And, it's time. It really worked, I thought.
It did.
It was really
and
cool.
Tony Todd actually was at the end of his life, and he was dying when they filmed this movie. And you can tell, like, he looks very,
very frail,
thin and frail. But, like, kudos to him for giving one last good performance.
Yes.
And then they even let him get the wall, like, I'm going to leave. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my life. I don't remember what he says, but it's a nice little goodbye to the character and really to Tony Todd.
It is. And I'll go ahead and share this since we're talking about it. It's my favorite bit of trivia from this movie is that the directors actually encouraged Tony Todd and said,
Say what
we
you
want
want
you
to say.
yeah, just speak and say what you say, like, to the fans, basically. And
Yeah.
that's what he does. And he says, like, you know,
It's a really cool moment.
kind of gave this heartfelt, like, thanks for being along for the whole ride,
Yeah.
and exits.
Yeah.
And it's really cool.
That's really cool. Yeah.
But he gives them, as always, the needed piece of
He
exposition.
that character is in every movie, and he is literally just there for exposition. And the movies really don't try and hide that.
No, but I liked the exposition. It was basically like there's two ways you can get out of this. One,
Kill someone.
You take a life, yeah, and you get their time that they had left, and they're all thankfully like, no. But
It does lead to a really
It
dark
does.
comedic moment,
yes,
though.
it does, which we can talk about in a second.
Yeah.
And the other way is you have to die but be brought back to life. So basically, you satisfy death, need you to die, but you come back to life.
Which is exactly what I was talking about in the first Final Destination movie, where these movies do a really good job of having rules that we as an audience, you go, okay, that makes sense. Really, like a pretty highbrow premise for a movie, but really easy to understand rules.
Yeah. And again, from reading the trivia, which, by the way, there's way too much IMDb trivia about this.
Someone had
it's
some
redundant, and I could not believe. I kept reading, and I was like, I can't read all
Someone
this.
had way too much time on their hands.
But a lot of the trivia was just referencing, like, this was reminiscent of this from a previous installment stuff, and this was one that apparently has happened before in the series, that somebody died and was brought back to life, and that did work. So that leads to them planning, like, okay, so, you know, somebody's got to die and be brought back to life. And then it plays out. So one thing that this movie does well all throughout the movie is it does a great job of sprinkling little bits that pay off later.
Yes.
And that works both from, like, just things that happen in general in the movie. It happens with, like, connections to all the character deaths. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. But it does you can tell they have a lot of fun with, like, sprinkling.
They do a
foreshadowing
really good
here
job.
to there. But the next kid up has a deathly peanut allergy, and they've established that well in the movie.
They've
so they're
played
like,
the- yep.
somebody's got to die, and Eric, who, as big of a doofus as he is, you
Comes
kind
up
of
with-
you kind of like that. He's like, take charge. Like, I got an idea. This is how it's going to work. We're in a hospital. I'm going to feed you peanut butter.
And then I'm just going to take you and have him resuscitate you. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, that's actually a pretty good idea. Also gives you nice moments between those two, because we've learned, like you said earlier, we've learned that they're not real brothers. The mom had an affair. And those two get some nice moments together where they're like, I don't care what, like, we're brothers.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what I mean when I say just a little bit of heart and emotion. We've talked about it on other movies. It goes such a long way.
Yeah. Another bit of fun trivia is that the actor playing the kid who has deathly peanut allergies in real life, peanut allergies.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Also, he was one I kept looking at and going, like, he looks familiar. Have I seen him in anything? I haven't. And then it just occurred to me, he just really looks like the character Bart in How High.
Yeah. There you go.
That's a deep cut for people.
There you go. Go research that. But that, again, this movie is just one good sequence after another, because all that hospital stuff plays really well. And it's like Eric's trying to pump him up, like, we can do this. And the guy's like, okay. But then he hesitates. And then it gets a really funny moment when they're like, you know, he said we could also kill someone. And they both kind of look over.
Well, they go, how would we even know how much time they have left?
And they look over and there's a newborn baby. And you're like, oh, no. And they're like, nah. Like, that all works really
And
well.
I think Eric goes, well, and the other one's like, no.
No, it's really funny.
Yeah.
And they also get a lot of comedy out of the dude eats a Reese's, or whatever their version of a Reese's
Yeah.
is, for the first time. And he's like, well, you know, and you're like, uh-oh. And he's like, this is so good. And it's like, that's probably what someone who'd never had one would say.
Yeah.
Because they are so good.
Even a little touch, like Eric tells his brother, give me your EpiPen.
Like, you're
He's
gonna
"Why?"
want to-
He goes, because you have to die. I gotta, you know, yeah, you're gonna want to. And I'm like, that's really smart. I wouldn't have thought of that. Like, you gotta
everything
keep it
these
from
guys
him.
do feel like something someone would actually do if they were in their situation.
And it's like I would say, you either got to have believable characters and unbelievable circumstances, or you got to have believable circumstances for your unbelievable characters. You can't have both. And this was trying to go believable characters and unbelievable circumstances.
Absolutely.
Of course, what happens then with the MRI machine and all
It's insane.
It's
but you buy it. You buy it.
But because you put, like, people doing everything else that they're doing is reasonable, you'll accept this insane.
Never once
premise.
was I like, oh my gosh. I was like, awesome. Like, and they ride this amazing line between, like, this is kind of gross, but it's really entertaining and funny when the dude has various piercings, we'll just say.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, but you're also kind of like, that's kind of funny in a way.
Yeah, we talked about this before, like when we talked about weird movies, like, I don't know when, a year ago.
Yeah.
And we're like, how things are a spectrum, like what you think is weird. Like some people might think, same thing's true with like violence, where your tolerance for violence in movies is a spectrum. And I think we're both fairly close, where this one, you're right. Like, it's like, ooh, that's gross, but like it is violent, but doesn't like get us. I could see a lot of people watching this movie and be like,
no,
are you kidding me? That was way too violent.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, okay, yeah, fair.
Yeah.
You know?
And yeah, you're exactly right. And it's just really, like, it's so funny. Like, these guys' plan was good. Death's a great opponent, and it's like the clash between these two. Because for a minute they're succeeding, and then everything just goes wrong for them.
And things that one thing I did like about reading the trivia is that it pointed out a lot of things I hadn't thought about. And one of them was, Eric dies in that scene, and it had been established death wasn't after him because he wasn't part of the bloodline. But what it fit in with was Tony Todd's warning: when you mess with death, things get messy. And he was the one trying to mess with and intervene, and that's what gets him caught up in it. And why he ends up dying.
And man, that dude has just an incredible death scene.
Yeah,
like he gets sucked up into the MRI machine, then the wheelchair, because the metal basically just bursts through his stomach almost and like folds him in this MRI machine. It's so gruesome, but again, I know I've said this a lot, this movie just rides that line perfectly.
Yeah.
And then again, like you're talking about paying off, they were messing with the vending machine earlier. Such an original idea to have kind of like the coil spring from the vending machine goes right into dude's head and then starts spinning into his head.
Yeah. And that's part of it. Like the deaths are almost like so gruesome that it's like comedic.
You can't, it's
you can't take it. You're not thinking like, oh my gosh, like could you imagine? Because like it is the silliness to it is what makes it not so bad. Like we talk all the time about how just gross gore movies that are just trying to see how gross they can be, we don't like.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why are we okay with this gore? Because it's so silly.
It's different.
The silliness neutralizes the effect.
And it's different when it feels like these are just real, like these are real movie characters, not people who are just here to get tortured, like, like Saw 6 victims or something like that. It's different. Great sequence though. That whole deal with the allergy and the MRI and all that stuff played so well, I thought.
Yeah. I know this is skipping, we're kind of skipping around. We're skipping to the sort of the main parts, the key parts. So then the climax of the movie finds we're down all the cousins. Yeah. And
they're gone.
We're down to mom from the bloodline, who is the estranged mom.
And again,
character,
they find some heart there where she was like, I could see that I was becoming like my mom, who is Iris. This might sound confusing if you haven't seen this movie.
True.
If you see it, it all makes sense. And she's like, I left to protect you guys because I didn't want to smother you and ruin your life like Iris, my mom, did to me. Yeah. So you got some heart.
Yeah. And they realize the only way the mom realizes the only way to protect my kids is I'll go live in this cabin my mom lived in for decades. Yeah. And as long as death can't
because if I'm alive,
me,
they cannot die.
Right. Because at first the boy's like, well, we're just going to live in a cabin for the rest of our life and not go outside?
The mom's like, no,
just me.
I will.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they go to this cabin, but by the time they get there,
just immediately goes wrong.
Yes, because Dad's like, I'm not. You want to go to the cabin? I'm going to mess up that cabin for you, and it blows up.
Yeah.
Knocks their RV into the water, but
that was really cool.
Yeah, so
like really good suspense sequence.
So the brother and the mom are like blown into debris, and because they got out of the RV, I guess. Yeah. But
the girl's seatbelt, the thing fell and locked her seatbelt.
Yeah, and so she's seatbelted in, locked in, underwater for that part of the.
Again, doing something Final Destination movies tap into really well is just a fear of being trapped and being submerged in water. Yeah, like I was like, get her out of there,
and good callbacks because
great callbacks
all the way back to the first Final Destination when the bully guys was in the car on the train tracks and his seatbelt wouldn't unbuckle, and it's like
a lot of great callbacks. Yeah, and as an audience member, you're immediately understanding what's going on. Okay, if she's probably going to drown. If the brother can get to her in time, he can resuscitate her, and they've beat death.
And again, the things they sprinkle in early in the movie, they talk about him getting his lifeguard, certification. And she's like, I didn't even know he was.
So it's not just like this 15-year-old kid or whatever old he is just knows CPR.
And you're like, yeah, was that a setup? But yeah, that's what movies do. They set
that's
up.
What they're supposed to do.
Off.
Yep.
Yeah. The mom helps save the son by pulling him out of
awesome
debris.
Death for the mom.
And she assures him that he's okay, and then all of a sudden
she's mid-sentence and just, what is it, like a light pole or something falls on her?
Gets splatted.
Awesome.
And again, almost it's super violent, but it's like cartoonishly.
It's so cartoonish.
Splats like a,
Yeah.
I don't know. So then, the brother has to get in, save the sister, wake her up, and she's like,
cool moment sprinkled even in that, where it's like Death's fighting back, like the knife closes on his finger.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, Death is just trying to prevent this at every chance. Good stuff.
Yeah. And so then we cut to, sort of our final scenes. Things, are cleared up.
Yeah.
Everyone knows,
Well,
there's
they're not.
some sort of little twist. The son is going on his like prom date, which again had been talked about before, it's not totally random. I loved the dad introduces him to the date's dad, who's a doctor, and a little hero. Just like, yeah, he saved, brought me back from the dead. And he's like,
that was a great
so
beat.
She's like,
that was great.
What do you mean? He's like, well, technically you weren't dead.
So again, as an audience, immediately you're like, here we go.
Yep.
Now, big spoiler, I did not expect the two main characters to end like it did. Because some of the Final Destination movies, it'll cut away, kind of like the first one.
Yeah.
Like you would see the train coming, boom, movie over. No, this movie shows them just get splattered and killed by logs, which is a callback to Final Destination 2.
Right. So one thing that we should have brought up is this penny plays a key role
such a
throughout
big
the
part.
whole movie.
Yeah,
and
that
it kind of represents the small random thing that causes
set
so
all
much.
this off,
So in the beginning, it was a key part of the disaster. Because the kid threw it. She helps neutralize that by taking the penny from the kid before he throws it off once it cuts back to like real time. At first I was like, how in the world does she know that penny caused all that trouble? And then I realized, she just ran around trying to fix everything. She ran back inside and
she put that fire out.
She
doesn't know what. Again, good writing.
Yeah. But that penny just makes its way. I can't remember how it makes its way through the story, but it makes its way all the end.
They drop it at the hospital. A random old lady picks it up. Yeah.
And then she's trying to pay for lemonade. It drops at her purse, falls down all these stairs, falls on the train track. I mean, ridiculous.
Of course it is. But you're invested.
And then right when the brother and sister realize, oh shoot, if you didn't die, we're still on the list. Boom. The train comes
again,
piling
over the top.
How
can you not enjoy it?
I mean, it's taken out a neighborhood because there are whole houses just being crushed by this.
And that train is, and that was well shot too. That train is this far behind them, and you're like.
And it looks like they get away for a second because the main wreckage stops.
They let that breathe for the perfect amount of time.
Goes over and tosses the logs.
And just splats them.
And cut to black.
Awesome.
Immediately.
Awesome.
Yes.
Like, that's a, I'll just say it as a little crude, but that's a pretty ballsy ending.
Yeah.
Like to just have two young kids who have survived all this terrible stuff and watched their mom die and all their family members die. And they end that movie by just getting splatted into the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. Movie over. A great hour and 50 minutes.
So, yep. I'm going to share some more trivia here because that was my next note. At an hour and 50 minutes, this is actually the longest Final Destination movie in the franchise.
Yeah. Which probably does lend to your point about that period of time.
There's like a 30 minutes between initial premonition and like...
Well, time well spent, though, because this is, I would say, of all the Final Destination movies, this is the most I've ever cared about a group of people.
Yeah, that's fair. The main protagonist girl is the only protagonist in the Final Destination franchise who isn't a visionary, meaning not the person who saw the premonitions.
Right, she's seen her grandma's premonition.
Yeah.
Right? She's seen what her grandma saw.
Exactly.
Which again, if you think about it, it makes no sense. Who cares?
No, and it has the worst lines in the movie is because they know it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
When she's talking to the grandma, she's like, how's this happen? She's like, I don't know. Maybe my cancer somehow passed it on to you, or maybe it's just something else. She's like, I don't know. It's like, you should have just said, I don't know.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have even said the other things.
But they do move through that so quickly.
For sure. They're just like, rushed along.
whatever.
So we mentioned it before. The cousin Eric who dies when he's not originally on the list, but he gets killed because he messes with death. That's the first time that's been part of the series.
That was a really cool idea.
Yeah. This is maybe my favorite because this was just such a great moment in the movie. Eric's response of, is that why he always wanted to play catch? In response to learning that he's the product of an affair with the neighbor was improvised. And apparently there was equally brilliant, sometimes weirder options on the table. And two of the ones they gave were, is that why he came to all my swim meets? And is that why he always called me Buckaroo?
That's all incredible. All great lines.
So this one hurt me though, because my initial thought was, it's amazing the way this movie is tying together all the other movies, because in the scrapbook that the grandmother's been making, tracking all the people's lives.
I'm sure there's just Easter eggs out the wazoo.
You see like a plane, you see a trailer with the, I was like, oh, it's tying all the movies together. But in the trivia, according to the directors, the protagonists of the previous films in the franchise are not connected to anyone present at the Skyview, and citing the reason would be that it would break canon, considering we see the parents and families of the characters still alive by the time their own brushes with death come around. I'm like, oh, that does make sense.
Yeah.
But
which again shows that the people that made this movie care about this franchise.
They're paying attention. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
But it just means like
You know what though? It's going to work both ways for people who don't go read IMDb trivia.
For sure.
Let them think it; they'll be happy.
For sure. As of May 15th, this is the highest rated film in the franchise on Rotten Tomatoes.
Dude, people love this movie.
With 93% on critics now when I looked, 89% audience. And I gotta say, like, this also just goes to show the way people view movies like this has totally changed.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about, like, I don't know why, probably a lot of it is just the people who are critics now are a different generation.
Right.
They've grown up with movies like this.
Yeah.
I don't think they're quite as this is film type
they
snobs.
don't have their noses quite as high
Movies
in the air.
have been more diverse and more about entertainment for longer. And so, I think we talked before, like, horror movies never used to have a chance with critic scores.
No, they were dead on arrival.
I mean, like, you would have to be the elite of the elite, the Silence of the Lambs.
It used to be like Exorcist, Silence of the Lambs, The Shining.
Yeah.
It used to be a very small list.
Right. You certainly wouldn't get the sixth film in a franchise as
with
silly
such
as
high
Final
reviews.
Destination. Yeah. But for sure, it got a lot of positive reviews. My next one is my next couple are all related to deaths, and I thought these were neat. Again, trivia, just pointing out things I didn't think about. So Iris, in her premonition, dies when she falls from the tower, but she lands like kind of face first on broken rebar. And then when she does die, she's impaled by like a pole, and it mirrors.
Also, that was awesome. Also, too, I meant to throw this in. The lady who plays older Iris, I think she does a really good job.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying it's a great performance, but like for what she needed to do and for the ridiculous things she has to say, she does a good job. And I do like the beat of like the granddaughter's like, I gotta go. And she wants her to have this book so bad, and she knows she's dying anyway. So she's just like, and she steps out of the house. I read it like she knew she was going to get killed.
She tells her, seeing is believing. I'll let you see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she just accepts her fate. And I was like, okay, that's a really, really smart, well-written moment right there. That was really cool. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. Thought this one was funny. When Paul tries to convince the receptionist to let him and Iris into the restaurant, that's the beginning of the movie, The Premonition. Paul is the boyfriend. Despite being fully booked, the receptionist says, "You're tearing me apart." He ends up dying by being bisected by an elevator. It's like, those are the little things. You could tell they had so much fun.
They had
like,
a
this
blast.
guy's going to say this line, "You're tearing me apart." He's going to get torn apart.
Yeah.
This one, maybe a little more of a stretch, but Eric's first scene has him playing Mortal Kombat 1, where his character pierces his opponent in the head with a metallic weapon. And Bobby would later die of that magnetic spring to the head, which came loose because Eric meddling with the thing. So Eric basically killed someone the way that he killed someone in the video game.
Right.
And then this one I didn't think about. While leaving the hospital, Darlene, the mom, nearly T-bones a log truck.
Yeah.
And this is when they stops and goes like, maybe I should drive.
Yeah, you drive.
Yeah. So you're like, oh, I almost killed you with logs. Her kids end up getting killed
with logs. Yeah.
Like, so many little great,
things,
and I'm sure there's more that like.
Sure, there is. It's like we talk about all the time. Sometimes just a little attention to detail and a little thought goes such a long way in movies.
Yeah, but like if people can't tell, as we're just kind of rambling on about this movie, like it's just so much fun.
It's a
and this
lot
is why
of
I want
fun.
to talk about it. It's just fun to be like, dude, this and that, like, isn't that goofy and fun? And wasn't that a good time? We talked about with the cast, like how I hadn't seen anybody before. I did say if I had to peg anyone as like people to watch, I did think the girl who played young Iris, was really good.
Yeah.
And then the guy who played Eric, probably the only reason, like it's probably obvious, he's the only character whose name I remember from like the modern, but he was just so funny.
Yeah.
And
he did such a good job and took what could have been just such a cookie cutter character and made him likable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, maybe.
And the girl that played young Iris, I knew her because she was on a show that my kids used to watch.
Really?
Called Bella and the Bulldogs.
How about that?
Yeah. And now, so it's like, oh, good for her.
Yeah.
And Final Destination movies are, they're all successful. It's a great transition, I think, from TV to movies for actors.
Yeah.
Like they're probably going to be successful. It's a good jumping off point. So kudos to her. She was also like in like Star Girl or some kind of CW superhero show in the last few years. So she might be a star on the rise.
Yeah. This movie's been very successful financially already.
Oh, yeah.
It had a $50 million budget. It's already doubled that.
Yeah, it opened to $102 million.
Yeah.
And it's going to have legs. People like this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I went, like I said, last night. It was a Monday night, and there was a decent crowd in the theater for that Monday night show.
You mark my words, before the end of the summer, they will have announced Final Destination 7.
Yeah.
There's a 0% chance they don't.
Yeah. This would have been a nice wrap-up to the series.
It would have. They're going to make another one.
Yeah.
And I would just say, so be it. You can't stop this stuff. I hope they get the same team to make the next one as they did this one.
There you
go.
Yeah. We got to do it. Where would we put Uncle Chip in this movie?
Oh, easy. I would just say it doesn't even really matter where you put him. You just have him like walk in right as one of these deaths occurs, and he's just like, and he just turns around and walks away. Never says a word.
So I had an original answer, but I'm definitely changing it because as we were talking, I realized the answer was so obvious it was right in my face. I did write, it's a little redundant for him to be in this movie because as we talked about the last one, like the monkey is basically
it's Oz Perkins' Final Destination. Yeah.
I said maybe the mom is dating Uncle Chip when she shows up in the RV.
That's awesome.
That'd be funny, and he could give a pep talk to the kids. But then I realized, no, the most obvious thing ever is Uncle Chip should have just been the neighbor who was Eric's actual biological dad.
Oh, duh. Unbelievable.
Just one little moment of like Eric walking out, looking over the neighbor. There's Uncle
he's
Chip,
just
and
like,
he's just like,
he's like, son. And then the guy's just like, oh, and he just runs off.
Sorry, I wasn't around to be your real dad.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have been pretty terrible.
Yeah, you're right. It was right there in front of us. That or it's like I was saying, like Uncle Chip walks into that MRI. He's like, I'm here for my MRI. Whoa. And he just like turns around and walks off. sees the dude with a wheelchair coming out of his stomach. It's all a win. Your idea is the best though.
Well, Andy, this was so much fun.
Dude, this is why movies are the best, because I think we even pointed this out in our like what's coming out in 2025, and we were both just like, another Final Destination movie.
Yeah.
I love to be proven wrong, because that means the movies are winning. And this was so much more entertaining and honestly just so much better of a movie than I thought it ever could have been. So I'm very happy to have been proven wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For the rest of the week now, in a couple of days, I think what's going to happen is this is Tuesday. I'm going to have this one out by Wednesday. Thursday, I'm going to put out the Mission Impossible 2 one.
Yeah.
We're going to see Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning Thursday night.
Yeah, we are.
And we'll get that pod to you as soon as we can.
Yeah.
After that. So a lot of stuff coming up.
Great time right now.
Busy week, but just there's nothing better than a busy week for the podcast because that means there's a lot going on with movies. And honestly, it's going to continue to be busy because we got the new Mission Impossible, but then even after that, I think we're going to want to review that Fountain of Youth movie on Apple TV. Yeah. We're going to want to review Friendship, when we get around to that. So there's
a lot.
And then we said there's a lot. Just it's summertime. Movies are coming.
We got 28 years later. We got F1. F1? Is that what it's called? Yeah. We got a lot of stuff coming.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's an exciting time. Until then, everybody,
stay Stay out of the way of.
That's right. Don't mess with death because things get messy.
Things will get messy.
We'll see you soon.
See ya.